Welcome back to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR Podcast. I'm Danielle Ciccone,
And I'm Michele Topel.
and today we are going to be with another student of ours named Sasha Flores. She's in Texas. She's licensed in a few other states too. She's someone who took our intro course on demand and then joined us in October of 2025 for our experiential training. And I've had the chance to do some consultation with her, and she's lovely. So we're really excited to have her today.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hey, Sasha.
Hi.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming today. All right. So,
Sasha, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much.
why don't we just start with an intro? You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, anything you would like our listeners to know?
Yes. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm physically in Texas, but I actually see clients in Texas, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. And I should probably explain, I'm an Army veteran. I come from generations, Army, Marine, both sides, everyone. So I really tend to work with clients, military, active duty veterans, first responders, a lot of family work, children, and then adults.
Awesome.
Yeah, so what got you interested or curious about ketamine assisted EMDR?
Yes. Okay. So I trained in EMDR, and it was specifically the somatic and attachment focused EMDR training in 2022. So with my professional background, I've worked as a clinical social worker almost everywhere: parole, probation, inpatient, outpatient, just everywhere. And I realized that we really needed specific care to both, survivors and even those that may have committed different crimes. We needed specific care to help them make sense of their experiences and what was going on. So naturally, the flow was to EMDR. Um, and when I was initially trained in EMDR, I ended up physically sick myself, like massive migraines that lasted for like a week. And for the record, I've never gotten sick. I don't get migraines, so I didn't know what was happening. But I realized very quickly that I have a complex nervous system. And so I realized like basic training wasn't enough. I ended up like cross training and certifying in like accelerated resolution therapy, brain spotting, just all of these sort of modalities, approaches. But I was realizing very quickly that the basic training in any of these, it wasn't enough. Kind of did like a science experiment on myself, and I would use the same target for all the trainings. And I realized my system would block it. It was literally like it was just escaping around the work that I wanted to do. And so I learned about the ketamine assisted EMDR, and I thought, maybe let's see if that will be a little different. And so then that's how I ended up there.
So it sounds like, Sasha, like it was really kind of your own personal work or your own experience that
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
prompted this.
Yes.
So how did you find us? Because I think you were among some of our very first students.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like how you found us, like whether you were like, I don't know about this, and what your expectations were.
Yes. So it was actually through Facebook groups, and I was in
Mm.
consultation, and that's what was coming up because I'm so cross trained. I obviously get exposed even globally to other people. And it was it was kind of like the split experience of I would meet other people who like therapists or trainers, and they would say, "Oh, we have complicated systems too, but we can't really talk about that, or the basics not enough. You've got to do even more." And one of the Facebook groups, I believe, mentioned, and I'd already seen about like ketamine therapy and then psilocybin, MDMA, and just kind of looking at that. But then I discovered somebody recommended your ketamine assisted. And I loved that yours included the actual training, and then like the on our own, I was able to do the basic training and then the experiential. And I was like, we
Hmm.
need to do it. So that's how I ended up there.
Nice. So you didn't have any prior experience with ketamine assisted therapy, right?
Not at all.
Okay, so
I
this
will
was your
say,
your introduction to that, to the medicine. Yeah.
yes. And I have had clients that had done ketamine assisted, but it was for the psychedelic level, or they went to like shaman and they did really specialized work. But can be very expensive, not easily accessible. It's very like there's a lot of limitations. But what you all offered, it was set up in a way that it's way more accessible. And that again just like added to the possibilities of how we could expand.
Nice.
So it sounds like, just based on what you were saying, that you really do specialize in trauma, in PTSD specifically, right? In populations of military veterans,
Yes.
incarcerated people.
Yes.
Um, and so I wonder whether you could share a little bit about how you've noticed the effectiveness or what the experience has been of doing ketamine assisted EMDR versus just like standard EMDR with those populations that you're working with.
Yes. So I was just thinking about that the other day. I still approach and follow the AIP model. So even with the ketamine assisted. So I learned very quickly, especially from your training and then my own experiential, but the ketamine, especially doing at the low dose, it doesn't subtly prepare someone or maybe make it safer for them to do standard EMDR. I still prep and move through it the same way. But what the ketamine does is almost create like this protectant for the nervous system so that the raw emotional horror, terror, a bit like whatever is there, it's not so physically intense. Step you can be it, embody it, but it's not blindingly taken over. And so it really gave an opportunity, and especially for the populations I tend to work with, we still are following the standard EMDR AIP model. We're still doing grounding, pendulation between pain and resourcing. Most of my clients, we can't actually even tolerate like neutral or positive experiences. So we're still building up with that. But a lot of my clients I've been working with for years. And so with the ketamine assisted and all the work we'd already done, their system, with as long as the system agrees, is actually in a place where they can finally process and move through what they need to. Whereas, like, for years, we had just been literally trying to create the tolerance for it, the safety.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's basically the gist
Right?
of it, right? That it makes it more tolerable, makes it more
Yes.
bearable to actually be with the thing that we're trying to process. Obviously, if we can't do that, we can't do EMDR. It just doesn't it's not gonna work, right? So, yeah. But I like that you're talking about, especially with these really complex, presentations, the importance of the
Yes.
preparation. It's not like,
Yes.
"Okay, let's just rush into, the reprocessing." You're right. There's still, like, a lot of prep that has to happen, but once you get
Yes.
to the
Yes.
reprocessing, the medicine really makes it a lot more possible for people, to actually hang in there with it.
So it's
Yeah.
also interesting to me, Sasha, that you were talking about how there were people who you had been working with for a really long time who are now starting to see things move or change. I wonder whether there's a few examples that sort of come to mind for you.
I would say, and even like my own experience, the target that I've been working on, my system had been blocking. And it's interesting, and my clients have experienced it too, but specifically where we've been working for years and then we're ready to utilize the ketamine EMDR. But what ends up happening is the system is able to finally like adaptively store the information. And it was like the parts of us that were holding not just the bad or scary, they were holding like the beautiful or the joyful or the excitement. And so now it's adjusting to like feeling excitement. And I notice even with my clients, like I'll start dancing or I'm like clapping and so excited and they'll start doing it with me. I wasn't even able to experience excitement until my ketamine assisted EMDR, until I could actually process what I needed to. And so it's still just this adjustment of what we haven't had access to and remembering again and really getting to embody that. Um, And so I think the other part of this, which I'd heard about, was aware, but living it is obviously different, was really the support we need to give to our clients' families because they're used to existing and adjusting to this person, like when they're going to have their crash outs or whatever's going on. And now all of a sudden, it's not happening like that. Instead, the individual can stay present, maybe actually tell a joke, maybe come up with a solution, and so the families and those they're connected with are having to readjust to this newness of, okay, what do you mean we don't have to be scared? What do you mean you're like here with us and can tolerate? And so I do bring in a lot of families, like obviously with my clients' consent, to really just normalize what this can look like because it's a new adjustment for everyone.
Mm, yeah. I think what you're kind of speaking to there is something we talk about. Not only does it make the hard stuff a little easier to tolerate, but it brings that adaptive information, in the EMDR language, like more accessible. And
Yes.
probably, I would guess that's because the defenses are softening a bit. And so, what we're usually trying to push down because it doesn't feel safe to feel good or calm, with that can actually, we can allow that. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think that's a big thing we see too is the
Beautiful.
emergence of like
Yeah.
positive feelings, positive states.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. People who are able to access, like you were saying, Sasha, just like a sense of joy and lightness and even
Yes.
playfulness that hadn't
Yes.
been
Wasn't
available
allowed.
before.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, so I'm also wondering, Sasha, like what was it like for you when you started rolling this out in your practice? Were there any hurdles or things that you sort of struggled with when you were starting to actually apply this clinically?
Yes. So I think my poor clients, they've been with me for years, so they must feel safe enough with me. They just kind of embrace because as I would get certified and trained and I was doing my own healing work and they were experiencing this newness with me, they've just really welcomed everything with open arms. And a big part of what we're doing is I'm very much about consent. So I'm like, if this isn't something you're interested in hearing or looking at, you're not going to get hurt my feelings. You get to choose this time. But with Texas, it's been really interesting because obviously I'm in Texas, so there's kind of that protection and like stigma and honestly biases that might exist towards psychedelics, period. And so I really work with like providing a lot of education. I really love that journal article that you all published. I sent that to everybody, all my prescribers, to everyone. It's beautiful. But my clients in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, this is actually specific work that they're looking for. So they were just so excited to have the opportunity.
You've mentioned a few times the importance of your own personal work. And I know Danielle and I guess maybe I shouldn't speak for Danielle, but I think I
You
will, that
can.
it's been our own personal work in therapy that has really allowed us to be effective therapists, that our own unhealed stuff will get in the way of us really being available to our clients. And I mean, if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about what that part of your experience has been like for you, like how has your own personal healing and even your own personal KA-EMDR shifted how you're able to show up for your clients?
It's completely shifted, and it's so interesting, even, like, over my time when I was training and doing all of these other things, I could go into, like, a training, and I would be able to recognize if someone had faced their own pain yet, or if they were skating around it, because it would come up in the trainings, confrontations, just different things that would be happening, and the truth is, like, as human beings, we're constantly in those interactions with everyone. So when you think about the type of work, especially that I specialize in and I do, um, myself, the humans I work with, we have been exposed to severe, horrific, different things. And that settles into your body in a really specific way that publicly, at least just within the United States, we're taught isn't common or happen as much, and that's just not real or true. That's not the lived experience. And so, I'm just grateful that I'm in a different place, that when I'm with my clients and I get to be present for them, that I can recognize what's happening in my nervous system, and I'll in that moment even say, "This is mine and this is theirs." And I'm able to ground, and I can recognize that they can tell the co-regulation that's happening. And it's just this beautiful work. And again, with the ketamine, with the EMDR, our system can finally face and experience and process what it really needed to be able to do. And honestly, biologically, our body's been wired to avoid it because that wasn't safe or that wasn't okay. And so this is just a whole other opportunity. But if we don't have access, if we don't have therapists that have done their own work and faced their own things, our systems are going to recognize it. There's like this instinct of like, oh, they can't handle it. Oh,
Mhm.
now I'm having to comfort them. And by us doing this work, our clients are not responsible for us. They get to take care of themselves. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm also just hearing what I certainly believe. The work is relational, you know? I mean, yes, it's a protocol, yes, there's a structure, and yes, we're adding, some ketamine to the mix, but it really is about that experience of being able to connect, right? Um, and so I mean, Danielle and I in our research, have discovered some data or some different research studies that talk about how ketamine is an entactogen or an empathogen in low doses. Again, the research is limited, but I certainly see this that ability to connect with others seems to also, I don't know, just happen more readily in a way that's just very interesting to me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up, that it's not just what's happening internally for the person. Obviously, that is huge, but it is what's happening between the
Yes.
client and the therapist. And that's why, to be
Yes.
totally honest, when I started offering CAP, more the higher dose journeys, I didn't find it that satisfying because I felt like we lost so much of the relational aspect when the person's just having a completely internal experience. And yes, I'm there with them, and hopefully they know that on some level. But I just know for me, I much prefer working in the psycholytic range because you still have it's the whole thing is relational all throughout. So yeah,
Yes.
I think that component is huge. Yeah.
Well, and it's part of what provides the disconfirming experience for the client because I think almost all trauma, certainly all the complex trauma that I work with, that the trauma, the injury was relational. And so the healing
Yes.
also
Mhm.
has to be in relationship, I think, to be really effective.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm curious what you would say, because I know different people have different opinions about this. It Did it feel to you like you really needed or wanted to know what this medicine feels like before you felt comfortable offering it in your practice? That
Yes.
actually just knowing what the state is like. Was that something that, I mean, I'm guessing yes, because you came to our experiential training, but
I know. It's like
I'm
I'm gonna
curious.
be there.
I'm curious what you would say to other therapists who are maybe learning this and interested in this. How important do you think that is?
This is something I can remember even being in my bachelor social work program. And I remember one of my professors saying, you don't have to have the lived experience of something to be able to treat it. And there's like a part of me that's like, yeah, that's true. But also, I've had so many of my own lived experiences that there's not words for. And so, and I don't necessarily agree that like empathy is necessary, but it's more of the idea of we have these biases. They're just naturally there. We already have these stigmas. Like, are we truly aware of our own and where we're working from with it? And so anything that I have like trained or trying to do with my clients, I have experienced every single one. And I will never offer something that I myself did not endure. that's kind of a harsher word, but for some of them, it wasn't comfortable.
Yeah.
It was literally just enduring it.
Yeah.
Luckily, the ketamine wasn't like that. It was beautiful. Like some of these others were very rough, and I was like, oh, I don't like that one after all.
Mm.
But specifically with the ketamine, it was very important that I also experienced this. And I know, like, obviously there's contraindications, so not everyone is going to be eligible for the prescription. And so there is kind of that aspect to it. But if it is possible, I definitely encourage it because there's not words to try to describe this lived experience. I just come back to that over and over. Just having that lived experience, it just adds a special nuance where certain things may not have to be explained or understood, or immediately the system is like, no, I believe you. Like, you don't have to
Mm.
explain.
Yeah.
Then, so, to sort of piggyback off of that, can you share maybe with our listeners a little bit about what the experiential training provided you, or what? Yeah, just what your experience was.
It was so fun. And I'll admit that I was so nervous. Like, I don't know what
Understandable.
this is like. And especially the target that it was the same target I'd used over and over, and the other approaches hadn't even touched it. But with this one, it was just really amazing because you are conscious through all of it. And again, I have more of a complex system, so higher on the dissociation spectrum. And the first thing I remember recognizing was how quiet my mind was. Normally it feels loud and chaotic, and it was so quiet. But not a quiet that was scary or intimidating. It was like this state of honestly relaxation. And I only know that now because I'm trained in hypnotherapy. So, like hypnosis, if you've done it, it's this really deep state of relaxation, but you're perfectly conscious and aware. It was fascinating because with the ketamine, like once that was in my system, it didn't silence or kick out any part of me. Like all of me was there and all parts were just like, okay, let's do this.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
was really amazing. And I could tell, I IFS and ego states and all of that. So I'd already done that system work of like, okay, certain parts don't have to be here to see this. Certain parts can, and my system was just like, okay, let's go. And so that you're really able to go into that work. Yeah, it's was truly incredible.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm really glad you had that experience. And of course, you were nervous. We always say, we know this is a really hard thing to do, to
Right.
come to this thing with people you don't know. And so many of our students, like, they bring deep, important stuff to the training,
Yes.
because I mean, they're like, hey, I'm going to put this thing to the test,
Yeah.
which I don't blame them. And it's
Yes.
amazing how really cool stuff can happen. And I think, like what we've said before is then you trust it. And kind of like you were saying, you're not questioning. And there is kind of just like like when your client is sharing what's happening with them, when you've had your own experience, there's like okay, I get it. I know what you mean. Whereas if you never experienced this state, which is not, it's not a psychedelic state, but it still is not an totally ordinary state of consciousness. um, it can be hard to wrap your head around what the
Yes.
client is experiencing.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
it really is.
yeah,
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 Danielle and I love doing those day-long experientials.
that's the best part. It's really fun. Yeah.
Well, and that was the other part for me. For what I'm trained, all these other things, it would be days long. And with your approach, we didn't have to do any of that. I was able to be the therapist and then the client. And you could feel as soon as the medicine was in my system. And then I knew as soon as it was like there, and I was just back to my regular level of consciousness. And it was amazing. Like I went home and had dinner with my family,
Mm,
and your brain is still doing all that work, like all of that's still happening, but it wasn't as physically exhausting as some of
yes.
the others. Like, I just felt, just more connected and more embodied, and I think it was also just more pleasant because I remember even my husband was like, "You're in such a great mood," and I think he did actually tell me that. He's like, "It's not like some of the others where I would just be headaches and different things
Mm,
because," but with the ketamine EMDR, that just wasn't a part of my experience. Even now that we're talking about it, even my husband was like, "You're in such a pleasant mood. This one was great."
yeah. And I think that's typically, I mean, it's so fascinating to me how we can go into this like deep territory for, 45 minutes or however long, and
Yeah.
then you can kind of come out of it. And you're right, because I have the same experience when I do this therapy, and I've seen this with, yeah, pretty much all my clients.
Yes.
You don't feel just like drained and depleted, even though you just did a bunch of deep work. There's a lightness
Yes.
somehow, right? Even though there's such depth to the processing and intent, there can be intensity, but not in a way that feels like totally depleting, right? Which is interesting. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you had mentioned this, Sasha, about how there's a sense of protection almost like that. Yeah, that we're protected in a certain way. Or I know Danielle, we're creating a new advanced course now, and one of the headlines that Danielle came up with was making the unbearable bearable. And
Mhm.
Love it. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and so we do, I think, in order to get past something, we need to move through it. And some of it is hard to tolerate. And so this does allow for that process to happen and to have it be more, yeah, just more bearable,
Mhm.
Yes.
and to
Yeah,
feel safe and to feel a sense of safety.
yeah.
Yes.
I'll just share in my last therapy session, it was so abundantly clear. Of course, I try to take off my therapist hat and just be in my client role, right? But I
Right.
couldn't help but notice how I was like moving towards something really painful that I know in a normal state of consciousness, I would have gotten completely intellectual about. I would
Yes.
have been able to talk about it, but definitely not feel it, and then skirted away from it as soon as I could. And I could
Yes.
really sense that I could just stay there. It, it was
Yes.
it was so fascinating, and sometimes I think I had the realization of, oh, I don't even think I realized how much I used to pull away from this. We do it so unconsciously, we don't even realize how much we're trying to avoid feeling some of these things.
Yes.
But when I could see, oh, whoa, I can actually be with it, it showed me how much historically I had avoided it. And then, in typical therapy or even with EMDR, still, there were layers that I hadn't really gone to. And I have done a lot of therapy, a lot of
I
EMDR.
know.
There were layers that still were unpacked, but with this, like, like you said, that safety allows you to say, okay, I can actually look at this. I can actually feel it. I can name it. I can realize the truth of it, and I'm okay, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty deep healing.
That's where
Yeah.
transformation can occur. Um, so just to shift gears maybe a little bit, although I love this discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, this is such just really rich stuff. But I wonder, Sasha, after the experiential, I think you did some consultation, right? And I wonder, like, was that a support to you? Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like? And
Yes. Yeah, so I did consultation with Danielle and we're still meeting. It's truly been invaluable because there's different nuances that come up. And so it's really nice to like not be alone and still kind of navigating this work. And in general, I'm a firm supporter of consultation. I have my own therapist, my therapist has theirs, just this ongoing support. And especially because I'm in private practice by myself. And so I love both the individual and group consultation because, again, we're getting exposure to how everyone else is viewing things as therapists and providers and then our own work of it. And at the end of the day, that's just truly the invaluable part because you never know what's going to pop up. Just in general, we're dealing with humans.
Yes.
So really, as we navigate it, and it's been fun to even hear like how we communicate with other professionals, prescribers, PCP, just all of these conversations, communication, the education, and just to get to witness the shifts that are happening on so many levels of curiosity and openness, where obviously that wasn't as common, especially with psychedelics. So it's the consultation's invaluable.
Thank you. I'm so glad you've been part of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, as much as we love this model, the truth is people are complex. Every story is, every human has their unique story, and the application of this might have to look slightly different, depending on the person. So, I think with anything that we learn, especially something like this, that is a power tool, big time, to make sure we are running some things by other people, especially when we work alone, because the
Exactly.
application of it, it's nuanced, right? It's individualized, very much so, even though we have a protocol that, that we want to pretty much stick to, the application of it is so nuanced and individualized. And so being able to talk that through with someone, super helpful, right? Yeah.
But, this also makes me want to maybe go and touch on collaboration with the medical providers, right? Because and especially in Texas, I mean, maybe some of
Yes.
the other jurisdictions you might have a different experience, but like in Texas,
Yes.
what has it been like finding collaborating prescribers, and how important has that collaboration been to you?
Yes. So honestly, with Texas, the prescribers I work with are references that I received after training with you all. So they were already familiar. One of the prescribers did join one of the practices, and they're so supportive. I sent them the journal article,
Mhm.
information. They were just so thorough in communication, and just, it's been amazing. With Oregon, Washington, I haven't reached out yet for Colorado. The prescribers have been really supportive, and they're so funny because a lot of them, they're used to the psychedelic levels.
Mhm.
So when we're talking about the low dose, I send them the information, we meet, and they're so excited. Like, it's been really positive responses of like, this is amazing, and just they're already thinking of referrals. And but I'm thinking about my attempts, like in my community. I live in Corpus Christi, Texas, so like a really southern part. And I have not been able to build those relationships. And I'll definitely have to approach it differently, I think. But I still hold out hope that, like, with the approach of the education and the journal article and really breaking it down, that we can bring in more support, because I'm actually getting very high interest just within my local community. Because we have generations of suffering and just lots of different things. And humans recognize at some point, maybe if we're lucky, that we're not okay. And a lot of them have been in therapy for decades or years with one therapist. And even the therapist will say, like, we're having treatment resistant, whatever's going on. But we're really looking at complex PTSD, structural all of these different things that, we can work with. And once their system's prepared, once they're ready, the ketamine assisted EMDR is giving that extra cushion. And we're talking about changing and giving access to care that just, like, it that really doesn't exist in my community. So I
Mhm.
have hope. I'm gonna build the relationships locally, but that's definitely gonna
Yeah.
take extra work.
Texas has been interesting lately. I mean, I've been hearing little bits and pieces of what's been going on there, and it's just, yeah, I mean, our hope, particularly this way of working. I mean, obviously, there's not no risk, but of all the ways that you could work with this medicine, this is a pretty tight way to do it. The client is always going to be with the therapist. You're working in close collaboration with the prescriber. They're not just self administering it at home by themselves.
Yes.
They've been carefully screened by two licensed professionals. It's a
Yes.
low dose, right? Like, so again,
Yes.
not to say, oh, there's no risk, but
Right.
of all the different ways that I've heard ketamine being prescribed,
Right.
I mean, there are some much looser ways that it is used, and we're not really a fan of that. We obviously created this because we believe that it should be um, in concert with a really strong psychotherapy.
I think, that the protocol itself, both the EMDR protocol, but also the protocol then that we've developed, the KA-EMDR protocol, I just kind of feel like it's a container that provides some safety, that there's structure there. And I don't know, for me, I think that feels safer than just sort of, I don't know, just going off on your own
Yeah.
or even having a psychedelic experience, that the structure provides safety. Um,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and our approach, I mean, it is a gentle it's meant to be a gentle approach. The experiences can be deep and profound, but it's a relatively, like, gentle approach, right?
well, and it can be targeted, right? I mean, if what you're doing is adaptive information processing, or memory reconsolidation, and if you have a good idea of where you're going and making that past present connection, right? That um, honestly, I've never seen anything else that is as effective for people for whom, the ketamine, the low dose of ketamine is appropriate. It can be pretty powerful.
And
Yes.
hopefully, you know, give people relief so they don't have to be in therapy for another 10 years or, right? I mean,
Yes.
not I know that everybody's different, but I think what we've heard a lot is that it can really accelerate the
Yes.
treatment, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, my hope is that all states get on board and
Yeah,
understand
me
really what we're doing here. It's really, really intentional. There's like a really strong rationale. When you really look at the science, there's really, really good rationale to do this. Um, and we're trying to do it as ethically and as responsibly and as, intentionally as possible. So,
Well, and also, Sasha, I feel so touched, or just really like I can feel how deeply you care about your community and the people who are suffering in your community for whom, you know, you're able to provide some healing or some relief. So I wonder, Sasha, is there any message or anything that you would really want our listeners to know about ketamine assisted EMDR, or yeah, like what is the takeaway?
I would say, to really approach it with like some curiosity, again, openness. Through the openness and the curiosity, we're really able to expand and see the difference that we can make. And I think like you two both just expressed it beautifully, but that's what my system keeps coming back to because with the ketamine assisted EMDR, we are targeting very specific things. We are allowing that AIP process to take place for everything to connect and adaptively store while we're actually creating these new um, positive relationship experiences. And that's what makes this really, it's truly intimate doing your ketamine assisted EMDR because the client's conscious and they get to actually be present in their system and move through this in such a healthy, relationally accessible way that wasn't there before. And especially in my community, relationships are not safe. There's all kinds of rules, there's all kinds of harm. And so this is just a really specific way that we can provide care and support in a very strategic way. And really, it truly is accelerated like, even for myself, the target I used, I'd been working on in the last 4 years of trainings, and my system had protected it, hadn't even touched it, and it wasn't until the ketamine that I was able to actually move through it and process what I needed to, and I'm still seeing the effects of that, of how relationships have changed around me, my care and work. So I would say as a provider, to approach with some openness and some curiosity, and just really to focus on the humanity that we really are fighting for to strengthen and create when that hasn't been safe for so many. Thank you.
oh, thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Sasha.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, like, do you want to tell us maybe a little bit more about how, if someone wants to reach out, how they might be able to do that?
Yes. So I have my website, and then my email, and they can absolutely communicate with me through that. And especially if they have any questions or if somebody is looking to do more specific work, I think I'm actually in your website list
Mhm.
because I treated y'all. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, you're on our directory too, so people can find you
have a
there.
therapist directory. But what's
Yes.
the name of your practice?
Oh, yes. It's the Horizons of Hope Counseling.
Thank you, Sasha, for coming. So good to see you. I know we will probably see each other again soon.
Yes.
So it's been lovely to hear your story and just kind of watch you really be brave with this. I especially, I mean, I love all of our students, but I especially love the people who come who've never had any experience with ketamine, right? They've done all sorts of other training like you have,
Yes.
and they like are willing to take this risk with us because I know that's not an easy like risk to take, so to speak. So I'm so glad that it's that you made the choice and that it's actually like been a positive addition to your personal life and your work life. So
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you both.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much, Sasha. Thanks for joining us.
All right, Sasha,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thanks for listening to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR podcast. If you'd like to learn more, visit www.ketamineassistedemdr.com, where you can find out more about our research, our training programs, and you can also find a KA-EMDR therapist to work with.